This is the Clean Energy Show with Brian Stockton and James Whittingham.
Hello and welcome to episode 34 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
And I'm James Whittingham. Welcome to an entertaining discussion of the week's developments in clean energy and transportation. Brian, I think we're a fan podcast for the exciting clean revolution that's taking place in this decade. We're here until 2030 doing this podcast as the world changes, and it's getting rapidly changing every week, is it not?
Oh, it's crazy. The number of news stories, it's surprising.
You think one week it's going to be so busy, it can't be busy next week, and then it is. It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, well, I want to talk about Tesla's full self-driving update is on the way, the new build, as well as an update I got just for my car. And then more news stories about Hyundai's got a recall. And another story from CleanTechnica about our energy production here in Saskatchewan.
All right, and we'll have the much-anticipated return of James's TV Corner, believe it or not.
Whoa!
In fact, we might even have some special things there. Later in the show, we'll have the much-loved, much-anticipated, much-called-for lightning round, where I will throw headline after headline from the area of clean tech and green revolutions into your face, and you will respond with analysis and insight as you do every week. Brian, I know you prepare for this every week. You spend many hours preparing for the lightning round, and it's going to be a tough one this week. I'll warn you now, okay?
Okay.
All right. So I wanted to talk about a story that was on CleanTechnica about our very own province of Saskatchewan, which we talk about frequently. We're in Canada, we're in the prairies, we're in the middle of nowhere, but we're in oil country and next door to more oil country, which is Alberta, where the oil sands are. And we tend to not want to do green things here, right? We tend to be beholden to the oil industry, and no one even wants to talk about good things that are coming on the horizon as the rest of the world transitions. But they did a story. One person did an analysis on Saskatchewan being sort of an outlier. Sort of a weird place. He says it's not even hard to spell, just hard to spell, but also an interesting and unfortunate outlier. Interesting and unfortunate. That's how Michael Bernard sees a province. So he did an analysis, and I was fascinated, Brian, because we often wonder about this stuff, and he breaks it down. What would it take for our province to get to net zero? We don't have a lot of hydro here. We have some. There's obviously no chance for nuclear or anything like that. There's some opportunities for geothermal, which are getting off the ground now for electricity generation. We hardly have any solar. We have a little bit of wind that's been around for a little while and is expanding slowly. But we have most of the solar that's installed is privately done by First Nations or by individuals and farmers. And, there's no big utility solar farm here, is there?
They've been planning one for ages and ages, but it's still not here yet.
So anyway, he broke it down what it would take for this province of 1.1 million people, which is vast and rectangular, for what it would take. And it was basically $4.6 billion for wind and $8.3 billion for solar electricity. So around $13 billion total to decarbonize our whole power grid, our whole energy. He's talking about everything, though. He's talking about the power in your home, like there's the home heating and building heating, and industrial and everything would be how much energy would that take?
So it includes that.
So it's like replacing natural gas and everything else, and it's just theoretical. So about $13 billion. Now, keep in mind that they spent $1.5 billion on carbon capture on one part of one coal plant, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something like that, which was a lot of money just to take the carbon out of one coal plant. And of course, $1.5 billion we often ask the question, well, how much solar would have that made if we just put that into solar? The answer is a third of all the solar that we need, according to this person's analysis. Now, what I found particularly interesting is how he approached carbon storage, because energy storage. Energy storage, batteries were not discussed. It's almost like, batteries are too expensive, or something like that. And by the time we ever got around to doing this, I'm sure batteries would not be the same price they are now. And I hate it when people, basically he's using current technologies as if nothing changes and this is a theoretical exercise. Yeah. So he went with pumped hydro, which I found interesting. He said there's not a lot of opportunities for pumped hydro here because we don't have mountains, we don't have high hills. We're a pretty flat place, and you need sort of to elevate the water to higher ground and let it come down. And he said that that is 80% efficient, which is something that I've been wondering for a while. A battery, I don't know what a battery efficiency is on a Powerwall or mass grid scale batteries, but it's more than 80% because you have to power the pump to pump it up and then bring it down and turn it into electricity again.
Now, I'm going to interrupt you for a second, but yeah, so pumped hydro is the idea of when you have excess solar power, you pump the water somewhere up high, and then at night when the sun is not shining, you let the water flow down with gravity through a turbine and generate power. It is used all over the world. It's a great system. I came across a weird system on the internet the other day called Energy Vault, and there's a YouTube video that you can go watch if you want, but it's the same principle as pumped hydro, but it uses blocks of concrete. So it's this structure that has various cranes on it. And so the same thing during the daytime when there's lots of solar power, excess solar, this crane essentially builds a building, builds a tower of these big concrete blocks, builds it all up during the daytime. And then at nighttime, one by one, it lowers each one of these bricks. And then as the brick is lowering down to the ground, it captures that energy. So it's apparently as efficient as pumped hydro, or perhaps they're suggesting even more efficient.
Did it seem like a good idea to you? I mean, you watched the video and we'll try and link to it if we can, but did it seem like a good idea to you? My gut reaction was it seemed weird and this can't possibly work, but I haven't done the studies. I haven't examined this, and maybe it is simpler to do than something like pumped hydro, which, as you say, might be difficult to do in a place like ours. Well, I've also found it interesting that he sort of explored where the power corridors were in the province, because that sort of determines where you can put these things, and there weren't that many places. So he just suggested some smaller ones. Did you read the story?
I did, yeah. And I mean, batteries is probably a good solution, but
at the very least, it's got to be part of the mix, right? The batteries have to be part of the mix. It's just for grid stability, if nothing else. They work so well with stabilizing the grid and saving money in that way.
Yeah.
So, I found it interesting. He went with half solar, half wind. Some futurists would say, well, solar is becoming so cheap that solar and battery storage is the way. But, we're kind of weird here because we have a cold winter. And also, he noted 2 weeks of storage. We needed 2 weeks of storage, which I found interesting because we're not the far north where we don't have sunlight in the winter, but our days get short around December. And so we have less solar, but we have lots of sunshine even on those cold days, right?
Typically, but I guess you have to plan for the worst case scenario.
Right. And the worst case scenario is 2 weeks of storage. So yeah, it is possible. And he outlined what would have to go on. So it's very interesting. That's a CleanTechnica story. Could Saskatchewan, Canada meet its domestic energy needs from solar and wind? And the answer, of course, is yes.
Hyundai has had to issue a huge recall of their Kona EV electric car. They're recalling 77,000 Kona EVs, and this is a car that I considered purchasing, and it seems like a great electric car. But unfortunately, there's some problems with fire, so they've issued a recall for 77,000 Kona electric cars, and they're kind of fighting with LG Chem, who made the batteries, over whose fault it is.
Wow. So that the fires, if I understand correctly, are actually in the European version. That has happened a couple of times, right?
One of the first stories was from Montreal.
Oh, Montreal. Okay. So that's a big deal. And do you know that if it's in the battery cell itself, of like the whole pack is going to be, because that could be a huge recall. That's not like a seatbelt or something.
Yeah, well, like I say, they're sort of fighting with LG Chem about who's responsible, but apparently they do have some kind of a fix for it. It found the separator in the battery cell was damaged due to errors in the manufacturing process, indicating the battery cell could be the cause of the fires. The Forensic Fire Service also came up with the similar conclusion that electric problems in the battery pack assembly are assumed to have caused the fires. So I don't know. They have some kind of a fix for it. Otherwise, they maybe wouldn't even be able to do a recall. But it's also important to point out that there are over 200,000 gasoline vehicle fires every year in the U.S. alone.
And that's just hillbillies setting fire to the cars mostly, but they do start on fire. We had an instance in Regina, in our small little city here. Last week it was in the news. A elderly person had a medical problem and somehow hit the accelerator and passed out, I think is essentially what happened. And he crashed into sort of a cement sign, and the vehicle started on fire. It's just it's the worst thing ever. It's bad enough you're unconscious and you crash into something. He was, of course, pulled out very quickly by bystanders and is safe and doing well. But the point is, gas vehicles, I don't know why they start on fire. They shouldn't start on fire that easily, but this one did. And at least with electric car batteries, it's kind of a slow burn. It starts slow. It's hard to put out. They tell fire departments when they are on fire, you have to constantly douse them with water for a couple of hours. But it is sort of a slow. It's not a big thing right away.
Yeah.
So. All right, Brian.
Yeah, I remember I was in LA once driving down the freeway, and there was a car burning at the side of the freeway in LA.
Yeah. Yeah. And there was one on the Trans-Canada. There was no accident. It was just burning. Just decided to start on fire. It was a pickup truck. It was just burning. And of course, I have my story of the Burger King drive-through, which I think I've said on the show before, where I was driving an old car where of course the alternator wasn't working, so I was driving on battery power just to fire the pistons. So I had a battery charger under the hood. So I could constantly plug it in to charge the battery so I could get a few miles out of it because it wasn't recharging itself. And there was a bad contact made, and I was in the Burger King drive-thru and it started on fire.
Oh, my God.
Talk about your flame-boiled Whopper. Anyway, and the worst thing is that the battery went completely dead and the car turned off. And I was on fire and couldn't go anywhere, and I'm stuck in the Burger King drive-thru with anxious people behind me. But I calmly, as a 20-year-old, got out, hungry stomach and all, and just undid the misfortunate breach of polarity or whatever was going on under there, touching the negative to the positive. The battery came back to life. I started the car, thank God. It was hot and ready to go, and I moved on. That's my had I been a stupider, less faithful person in my own abilities to just address the problem and just sat there, the thing would have started on fire and burnt down a perfectly good Burger King. That's my story.
Yikes.
James's TV Corner, like Brian's TV Corner, but better.
Brian, I watched David Attenborough's A Life on Our Planet. That is a sort of a sequel. Well, it's a life story. It's a summary of the man's 94. He's going to croak any day now. He's barely alive. He's probably more likely to die than I am. And I found it interesting because you haven't seen the show, right? Let's just clear the air here. You're too busy of a man.
No, I haven't.
I found it interesting. I found it. It's not earth-shattering, so to speak, but it's interesting. And he frames it with Chernobyl. He starts talking at Chernobyl, and at Chernobyl you see nature thriving while humans are gone. And it's kind of a very powerful image by the end of the film, where he comes back to that and says, we're not worried about the planet surviving. The planet's going to survive in some way or another. The oceans may be dead. There may be problems, but nature will endure. It's just that we will not. So it's a powerful message. So at the end of the film, he offers solutions. And of course, some of them are quickly mentioned, like solar and things like that. But he also went to Europe and looked at rooftop gardening, which is something interesting. Now, I'll just have a little clip here.
Whenever we choose a piece of meat, we too are unwittingly demanding a huge expanse of space. If we all had a largely plant-based diet, we would need only half the land we use at the moment. The Netherlands is one of the world's most densely populated countries. It's covered with small family-run farms with no room for expansion. Despite its size, the Netherlands is now the world's second largest exporter of food.
So they're doing this on rooftop gardens. Because the agricultural community doesn't have a lot of space, they have these rooftop gardens, and they're exporting food. They're not only meeting their needs, they're exporting it. Like tomatoes, lettuce, things that you wouldn't grow in a northern Nordic climate. Your thoughts?
Well, this brings me to Brian's TV corner, which is, I promised last week I was going to get a clip from the CBC series. So I found the show and I found the episode. This is a company that's got rooftop greenhouses in Quebec, but I couldn't figure out how to download the show. So it's on CBC Gem. And I was going to, download and supply a clip so we could play it, but I couldn't figure out how to sort of download the clip to be able to grab the audio. But the show is called We Are Canada. It's on CBC Gem, which is CBC's online TV app. And episode 4 talks about this company that does these rooftop greenhouses, and they feature the one in Montreal, which is enormous and produces tons of food all year round in cold Montreal.
Where does the food
quite,
go?
Fascinating. It's all locally delivered, so people sign up for it as like a food delivery service, and they do the harvesting in the middle of the night. And when you sign up for the service, you kind of agree to a certain variance in what you get. Like, if they've got lots of tomatoes, then you're going to get tomatoes. If they've got something else, you'll get something else. But they've got, I think, 3 of these rooftop greenhouses now in Quebec, and just looks amazing.
When was the show made?
It's from a couple of years ago.
Yeah. And do you have any sense of how long these rooftop gardens have been around, and are they expanding them?
Yeah, the company, I think they started the first one in 2008, something like that. So they've been around about a dozen years or so. Yeah. And I believe they have 3 of them in maybe like Montreal, Quebec City, and somewhere else.
So when something's been around for that long, you tend to believe that it's real, and which brings me to my next point of hydrogen. And we've talked about this recently. Oh, yeah. And Alberta, our province next door, has announced a hydrogen. I don't know what they really announced. They just said, we're pro-hydrogen. They brought in all these people from across the country, but they didn't say exactly what they're doing. They want to make hydrogen. They want to export hydrogen, and they want to make it with natural gas from their oil industry, which is not the ideal way to do it. However, electricity making hydrogen is still quite expensive. So I see stuff around, I see like this morning, there was a clip where a news story that there's a hydrogen ferry being tested. So that's interesting, but, Chris Nelder is somebody I follow. He has the Energy Gang podcast, which I highly recommend. And he's very anti-hydrogen. He says there was a hydrogen boom in 2003, 2004, where everybody was talking hydrogen and billions of dollars were invested. And we're going through that again. But he says there's no real large-scale commercial development of it, the deployment of it. And he says, we're not even going to talk about it on our show until somebody does that, until somebody actually deploys a commercial scale thing, because it's just all hot air, hot hydrogen for now, I guess. And
so to speak.
And he also says that, we were talking about the California ban on ICE vehicle sales in 2035, and a lot of people say, well, it should be earlier than that. It could be earlier than that. And I have a clip here because he's talking about how if you do it sooner, it's actually cheaper.
Doing this would use a lot more electricity, and California had these electricity issues, and wouldn't this make it worse? And in fact, it would make it better, right? The problem with all this stuff is that the changes that we have to make to the grid to accommodate a decarbonized future are expensive, not because they're not cost effective, but just because it costs a lot of money. And if you are selling more kilowatt hours, which today we're not compared to 2003, then finance it easier while reducing electricity rates instead of increasing electricity rates. On top of that, you would then have all these other batteries throughout the state that you could then use to provide more grid flexibility. So moving to this future faster is critical, which is why I think 2035 is too late. I think if you wait that long, it'll actually end up being that, that you'll have to overspend on other grid infrastructure that you could have saved on had you moved to electric vehicles faster.
That's not Chris Nelder, but that's one of his co-hosts on the Energy Gang podcast. And what they're saying is that they're actually using less electricity. So if you're a utility and you're selling less of something and you're then required to quickly adapt to something else, it's going to be not great for you. It's going to be very expensive. But if you make people buy EVs, then suddenly you have a home market and you can start expanding, and that will help you transition to a cleaner grid. Very interesting concept, and something that I'm sure applies to a lot of places around the world, not just California.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. I hadn't heard that before. All
right. Well, I also wanted to talk about sort of this quote that the International Energy Agency is forecasting a massive slowdown in the rate of fall of solar costs, and this is something they've been doing for years. Every year they become closer to reality, something that you and I and everybody else in this area has known for 20 years, that things just don't go like this and then level out. They keep going. You think if you drastically expand the sale of something by tenfold, it's going to go down significantly in price. It's not going to stay the same. So solar has been going down 18% a year since 2010, and the report expects that the rate of cost falls reduces to just 2% a year in the period between now and 2040. And that's just not credible. So I just hate that. It's been a pet peeve of mine. I know that we have a segment on the show. In fact, let's just go there. Clean energy pet peeve. My pet peeve is the International Energy Agency being unrealistic about the future and everyone else being unrealistic about the future. Come on, people. Things are moving fast and you're going to get left behind horribly. Brian, tell me.
But aren't they just saying that the cost, like at a certain point, solar panels can't get any cheaper? Like, is that what they're saying? Like we're nearing the bottom of how cheap they can get?
That's what they're saying. And every credible expert in the field says, no, we're not even close. I mean, you look at the amount of solar that's in the world and what could be in the world, it's a drop in the bucket, really. And if we actually, move towards the climate and things are cheap now to expand, and it's cheaper, this is the cheapest source of power in most places of the world, then giddy up. It's going to become a lot cheaper than 2% a year. So it's not realistic at all. It's just wishful thinking.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't really sure. And I know that we've talked about, solar big installations hitting record prices of, like 1.6 cents per kilowatt hour. But that seems to me like, isn't that getting close to the bottom?
People have said that at 10 cents and 20 cents and, it can't go any further. Well, it can, apparently. It can. And they expect it to completely go down because it's going to go down. It's going to go down. Trust me. I trust in the experts, not in myself. I am not an expert. I'm simply a discusser. And Brian, we had some feedback, and I wanted to talk more about The Long Way Up, because I'm loving it. It is a travel show on prototype electric vehicles. 2 Harley-Davidson electric motorcycles going from the bottom tip of South America up to Los Angeles. on a continent that I know very little about. I will admit that now. I'm ashamed about that, but very few, doesn't get a lot of press. South America does not get a lot of press. I know more about Colombian drug cartels than I do about Bolivia or Argentina. And yeah, it's just, my son, the geologist enthusiast, was just, Dad, that's at 15,000 feet and there's a desert up there. What the hell's going on? He says it's just incredible landscapes. And, it's a stunning, visually stunning thing to look. And you feel, as a person like you and I, we feel sort of connected to it because we're electric vehicle enthusiasts. And these are two guys who are on motorcycles who are electric, and they don't have a lot of range. They're roughly 100 miles or so. And there's no charging infrastructure. ChargePoint or something, no, not ChargePoint, but one of the home charging companies put chargers for Rivian. Rivian has 2 electric pickup trucks prototypes. And by the way, I'll say this again, they were all just hot off the line. They had to have a Rivian guy fly in to the middle of nowhere to fix it once because it wasn't working. Prototypes that barely work and haven't been tested are doing this incredible journey. And it's riveting because they're in the middle of nowhere. And if it breaks down, well, if you run out of charge, and a lot of times what they're doing is they're actually pulling the Rivian with a gas van. They had to bring in a gas van because there's just no charging. So they put these chargers, but they don't charge very fast. The Harley-Davidson Livewire motorcycles charge very slowly. They don't have even a level 2 charging. They charge at level 2 the same as level 1, which is like 12 hours. And there's no fast chargers. Not a single fast charger in that whole route. So if they had that, it would be easier. And we had some pushback on YouTube about that because, they're saying, well, they didn't like the motorcycles. But they wish that they did the trip on diesel motorcycles, or not diesel, but gas motorcycles. And I'm sure I would have felt the same way because it was a huge hassle. But if you had the charging infrastructure and you had a bit better motorcycle, say a couple of years from now, it would be amazing because it's so quiet. And because you could charge in the amount of time it takes you to rest your ass. You have to have longer breaks when you're riding a motorcycle, I've noticed, than when you're riding, in a car.
Yeah, I started watching the show, so I'm up to date now. There's 6 episodes.
You're up to date already.
It seems like there may be...
You're hooked, Brian. You're hooked. Admit it.
So they're maybe halfway on the journey, so it's probably 12 episodes or 13. I'm not sure how many, but I've really been enjoying it. It was interesting to watch them tow charging the Rivians because they kind of had no other option to charge them. But apparently you just tow them for, 15 or 30 minutes and they're all charged up.
Because of regenerative braking, it just sort of works that way. I saw somebody do that with a Leaf once. I don't recommend doing it because I don't think you're supposed to do that. But the Rivians, they're prototypes and they're promoting the company. I love the Rivian truck. I think I would possibly even buy one if I was wealthy and had a choice, and maybe it'd be at the top of my list of vehicles. It's a very cool truck with a great towing capacity, which would solve some problems for me. But yeah, you love the show, right? Huh? Am I right?
Yeah, no, it's great. I'm looking forward to the next episode. I think the new ones come out Fridays.
How much of it is because it's electric that you're hooked?
Well, I don't know, maybe 50-50. Like you say, like the landscapes are incredible and they're doing all this amazing drone photography in all of these countries that I also have never been to and don't know much about. And yeah, crazy high elevations and these salt flats, and it's just amazing landscape.
Yeah, and I think that I would love to travel there, wouldn't you?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Let's do it in your Nissan Leaf. We'll do the same journey.
I couldn't even get to the next town over in my Nissan Leaf without that would be a whole 12 episode series in itself. So yeah, I love it, and I would love to go there. I have my niece and her friends went there to Bolivia. I don't know how like a 20-year-old sort of decides to go to Bolivia. I can't even go somewhere normal at that age, but apparently there was a way to get there, and it was cheap, and I would love to do that. And it's just a gorgeous landscape. We'll see what happens when they get to the trickier countries in Central America. And, talk about range anxiety. I have Apple TV expiring anxiety because I only have a year of free Apple TV. I bought an Apple TV box and I got a year, and I think it's December. So I'm I don't really know how long the series is, but I'm hoping that I wrap it up by then because, we love it. This is a part of our Friday nights now because there's no movies out.
I was kind of surprised that they didn't have all the episodes out because we're all used to now Netflix releases the whole season. So I just assumed I'd be able to watch the whole season, and I didn't realize I'd have to wait.
Yeah, it's frustrating. I've been watching 3 episodes and then weekly for the second of the batch of 3. And I think they do that with the morning show. Did they do the morning show? They release?
Not sure. I haven't watched that one yet.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's not very good. Yeah, Apple kind of screwed up with their launch. Anyway, Brian, what else do you have for us this week?
Well, I wanted to talk about Tesla's full self-driving beta. So Elon Musk has been talking about this for a while, that they've done a foundational rewrite of their full self-driving software. So they realized with their old code, they could only kind of get it to a certain level. So they decided to start a whole new build from scratch. And it's finally going to be released in a very limited public beta next week. And they're only going to give it to the safest drivers. And they have the stats. Like, they actually know how safe every one of their drivers is because they collect all this data on how everybody is driving their cars. So very limited beta next week to only the safest of the Tesla drivers. And this is apparently going to have point-to-point navigation with possibly very little human, interventions. Now, you still have to keep your hands on the steering wheel. If you're not paying attention, you don't have your hands on the steering wheel, it'll kick you out of the system. But this is going to be very interesting to see how well this is going to work next week.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big deal because, as we've been saying, when full automation comes, and the first market that it comes to, and the first regulation that allows it, it's a never-ending stampede, and companies offering robotaxis will do so with electric vehicles due to the cost of those vehicles being a fraction. So you won't be able to compete if you use gas vehicles against somebody. And if Tesla's the people doing it, then, which we all kind of suspect, then it's obviously going to be electric. Now, did you see the Waymo launch? Because they had a little thing that Elon Musk responded to. What's going on there, Brian? I'm kind of confused by that.
Well, Waymo, they have started their self-driving service in a certain market. Is that right?
Yeah. And, see, this is what I'm confused about. They're doing tests in Phoenix, but it was free because it was a beta. But now people who are in those tests can pay for a ride, and a third of them will not have a driver at all. Some of them will, and some of them won't. So they're offering a paid service right now in Phoenix, which of course has wide roads and perfect weather, and is the place in North America for doing the start of this, and then it sort of will be the last place it gets to because of our snow and poorly marked streets and such.
Yeah, so Waymo was the first to actually come to market with a self-driving thing, but they're going to be limited to just Phoenix. And Musk replied on Twitter or something, but the hope is that the Tesla system is more universal and they'll be able to kind of roll it out everywhere, whereas Waymo just doesn't apparently have the technology to do that.
Well, Waymo uses, they're sort of tied to geography more, whereas, and their LiDAR and stuff like that. But what Tesla's doing is making basically a human being driving the car and to sort of use their eyes and transfer that into an artificial intelligence which can understand things. Has anything happened to your car with updates lately?
Yes, I was going to mention that because I just got a new update last night for my Tesla Model 3, and it now recognizes speed limit signs, which is something we talked about a couple of weeks ago. The self-driving system, it always tells you what the speed limit is for the place you're driving, but it's not 100% accurate. And now it is, because it's reading the speed limit signs. And it was quite fascinating because I was driving around this morning and, I was going from like an 80 kilometer an hour zone to a 70. And what's fun is that it switches on the screen at the exact moment that you pass the sign that says 70. So it reads the sign in advance. I was going 80. It reads the sign in advance. And then if you watch the screen where it shows you where the speed limit is, the exact moment that you pass the 70 sign, it switches on the screen to say 70.
Do you know what I would like in a car, any car, is to have it beep at me if I'm speeding? Because I don't want to get a ticket. But sometimes, in Regina here, we have school zone cameras. So you can get a school zone ticket from a camera, which my wife did during the early on in the pandemic, which was horrible. It was a lot of money and unpleasant and all that. Not a good thing you want to get in the mail. So she just had a lapse of judgment. It's a local school zone that we've been through a million times, and she was in a hurry during work. So I'm just wondering, will it beep at you? Will it turn red? Will it do something if you can set it up to do that? I'm sure whatever doesn't happen now will happen in the future, or could happen in the future.
In the future, for sure. And probably with the, if you've got the full self-driving on and you're using that. But I did find there is a flaw in the system, which I discovered as well, which is the school zones that you're talking about. So that's great because up until now, it hasn't been accurately telling me the speed limit for the school zones. So it automatically let me know that the speed limit was down to 30 in the school zone. But then when you reach the end of the school zone, there's a sign that says end school zone, end school zone. And then you go back up to 50. But because the sign didn't say 50, it still thought the speed limit was 30.
Oh, snap.
It wasn't yet reading the sign that said end school zone. But again, it's a software thing that eventually they'll be able to fix.
Well, I wonder how many jurisdictions have that particular kind of signage.
Exactly. And this is the difficulty with a system like this. It has to understand all of these weird local things. And also, like, our school zones are 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. So again, it's going to have to read those signs. I'm going to have to try it sometime outside of those hours to see if it's also reading the time that it's valid.
That's asking an awful lot.
But eventually, I'm sure it probably doesn't now, but eventually it will do that.
Thanks to Tesla's over-the-air updates, it's constantly improving. How often do you get an update to your Model 3?
That's about every 3 weeks or so.
Is that right? And do you often notice the difference?
And some of them are
life-changing at all?
Well,
is there times where there's no features
and
it's just, glitches or something?
Yeah, there's definitely updates where it's sort of like bug fixes and you don't notice anything, or it's some very minor thing. Oh, and the other thing I was waiting for was to find out if my Model 3 has the heated charge port, which with this software update, people are learning which cars have it. But I shouldn't have been expecting it because I got my car way back in March. So apparently cars built in August or later, or delivered August or later, they have a heated charge port in their Model 3, but mine does not. And I found that out just now with this latest software update.
Well, that's too bad. I wonder how they do that.
I'm not sure, but there's, I got the same software update as everybody else, but people who have the heated charge port, the software update activates it and sort of does something different for them.
Okay. Well, Brian, do you have anything else this week?
No, I'm good.
Well, then it's time for the lightning round.
The Clean Energy Show lightning round.
All right, Brian, are you ready? I hope you've had your coffee.
I'm ready.
Are you sure? Okay. Scotland police buys 180 Kona electrics. Now, you looked at the Kona before the Model 3. What do you think of this?
Well, let's hope they don't catch on fire.
Very good.
Thank you.
Moving on. This is the thrill and the challenge of the lightning round. You really don't know what's going to happen. Yeah, it's a difficult thing.
You don't know.
I'll tell Brian this. It is difficult and challenging, and a few people would accept his position here to be in the lightning round on his end. Electric cars cost less to own, says Consumer Reports.
Yeah, this is something we've all basically known for years, but there isn't actually that much data. Consumer Reports did the data, and of course, it's like what, half the cost in terms of like ongoing maintenance than a gas car. So that it's good to have that that data finally out there.
Offshore wind grew 19% globally in 2019.
Wow, that's huge.
Thank you. Anytime you say that, you get a ding. New Tesla Model 3 cars spotted with Chrome Delete and new center console. Some people are calling it a Model 3 model year refresh. Where do you stand being a Model 3 owner?
Yeah, so it sounds like, so Tesla doesn't do traditional model years. They make changes kind of all the time. And so, you know, you might get a 2020, like some of the 2020s have a heated charge port and some don't, which is not what normal car makers do. But this is sort of a big enough refresh that it sounds like it's going to come at the demarcation point of 2021. So the 2021 Model 3 is going to have a heat pump and other options for Chrome Delete. So, yeah, I mean, I wish I had the 2021, especially because of the heat pump. But, you know, what are you going to do?
Well, I mean, this is the problem with buying electric cars, particularly Teslas, is they're always improving. It's like buying, you know, it's like if they released a new iPhone every 3 months or something, you know. If you buy it, you're committed for 2 or 3 years. But then, you know, Christmas time, maybe there's a better one out. I mean, it's kind of a predicament. I mean, you can't constantly trade them in. But if you were Brian Stockton, you would get a good price for your car because the retail value is very high, right?
Yeah, no, it's still not really a problem because the resale value is still going to be good on my car.
All right. How many times has Elon Musk been married? This is a skill testing question thrown at you by random.
I'm going to say 3.
All right. Follow-up question. How many different women has he been married to?
3?
2. He was married to Talila Riley from 2010 to 2012 and again from 2013 to 2016. They divorced and they almost got divorced again. Well, they did get divorced again. So Mack Trucks delivers its first electric garbage truck to the end user. We often talk about the disgraced Nikola and Tesla making trucks, but the people who actually make trucks, the Mack Truck people, and who else is there? There's another one or two. Two of the major truck makers are making electric trucks too. They're not sitting on their laurels here, so to speak. And so Mack Truck is, and if you think that the world is not electrifying and the oil is going to be fine, you're just not reading the newspaper, buddy. Tesla gives the Model X range increase with 2021 version 20 miles or 32 kilometers, and that is about, according to my calculations, 5.3%, just over the air.
Yeah, no one's entirely sure where the extra range comes from. If it's just a software tweak, or there's some speculation that they actually maybe tweaked the battery chemistry a little bit. So no one really knows, but the bottom line is that they were able to increase the range.
I'm hoping that's not COVID, that sneeze, because my son's friend, his mom, has COVID. And they live just down around the corner down the street. And the night that we watched Contagion, as everyone else did at the beginning of the pandemic, a bunch of ambulances went by, and they went to the person's house across the street from this person, and they put a video up that everybody was talking about of people, of the fire department wiping down cars, and everyone was paranoid, and we bought into that paranoia, having been just in the middle of watching the movie. And then now that person's mom, who's a teacher, has it. And my son is in the class with that son. So it's getting close to home, Brian. Well, I don't know how many more episodes I have in me, but my corpse can't make a podcast. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, my God.
Tesla, this is the final one for you this week. Update lets you lock Sentry Mode and the Tesla cam storage in the glove box. And I, Brian Stockton, don't understand the appeal of this or what actually is going on. What is going on here?
Yeah, so Tesla has a thing called Sentry Mode, and in order for that to work, you have to plug in some kind of a USB hard drive or thumb drive. And the way it's set up in my car is the thumb drive is visible. So Sentry Mode is supposed to catch somebody who's breaking into your car or whatever. But if they're super smart, they can just go and steal your USB drive, and then they're stealing any evidence of you, of them breaking into the car. So under the new configuration, and this seems to be part of the 2021 Model 3, they've put a USB port inside the glove box.
Oh, okay.
And they've been able to lock the glove box with a passcode. So you can put your Sentry Mode thumb drive or USB drive into the glove box, and you can't get into the glove box unless you use a passcode or, I guess, a sledgehammer. So it's just a more secure way to keep your Sentry Mode footage. So it makes a lot of sense. I bought a little USB hub thing, so it sort of hides it behind, it hides the USB drive, but if somebody knows what they're looking for, they can still find it.
All right, Brian, that concludes our 34th episode of the Clean Energy Show. And I want to tell people that you can get a hold of us, and we want you to get a hold of us. We want to hear from you. We have heard from some people, including Dawn this week, who pointed out that there is a Canadian company that released a CAD drawing of a electric SUV and wants to make it all in Canada. That is I think they're calling it the Aero SUV. And in relation or in homage to the Avro Aero aircraft that we once had at one time. Anyway, I think that's ridiculous. I think that all CAD drawings do not equate power. And we also just got a tweet just now on Twitter from Dawn in Toronto, who says solar power is now the cheapest electricity in history. Let that sink in. The cheapest electricity ever, and that is even in the early days of coal, where you had people making, a can of beans a day, shoveling coal into power plants. Is now the cheapest coal in history. And the projectaero.ca is the website that he tweeted to us. And the Project Aero, it looks like a crappy SUV designed by somebody with a CAD program. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean, unless you have battery technology, unless you have electric motor technology, Brian, I don't know what it means.
It's just too far away from a reality I don't like really looking at too many concept cars. It's just too much, too many things can go wrong before it actually happens.
All right, Brian, we'll talk to you again next week. Clean Energy Show on the Gmail, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com, Clean Energy Pod on Twitter, and we're on YouTube. Subscribe to us on YouTube, because we put videos up there. We put the first half hour of the show, and we put reviews, and soon I will be reviewing the KFC fake chicken nuggets. I'm James Whittingham. We'll talk to you again next week. Bye, Brian.
Yeah, see you next week.